you're missing out on effectively like 30% of options by not working with a broker who's familiar with the
off-market availability, or even has contacts in the areas that you might be interested in.
Yeah.
Real estate is really an opportunity. Most people are just not familiar. Let's change that.
Access granted.
What's up, guys? My name's Gus.
And I am Brad.
And this is the Commercial Department Podcast, where we talk about pretty much everything commercial related as it relates to real estate. So today we're going to be talking about essentially the purpose or even the advantages of leveraging a commercial broker, commercial agent, and just sort of all the ins and outs of that, because there's a lot of questions about why even use one. Because a lot of people don't even consider using one.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even, if they are considering using one, interview more than just one.
That's true.
Yeah.
So how do you look at it? What's in your mind? What's the advantage of leveraging a broker?
So a lot of people go ahead, and this is both for residential and commercial, but they make the assumption that a commercial broker, commercial agent, or even residential in this case, is just there for finding the properties and opening up doors.
Right.
If that's all you're searching for, you're not paying, or you're getting way less than what you're paying for.
Right.
What you really want is someone who's going to quarterback the entire system for you, is what I like to say.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to go ahead and be trying to move forward as a strategist for you.
Yeah.
And when I say strategist, I mean as far as negotiations and even evaluating properties.
Mm-hmm.
They also want to go ahead and have market knowledge on what the actual market's looking like. Residential, commercial, very different. When it comes down to commercial, there's different subtypes that you'll want to make sure your agent's familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a retail user, you want to make sure you got an agent who's familiar with the retail use. If you're an industrial user, an even bigger caveat, you want to make sure you have an agent who understands industrial.
Yeah, you're starting to get into categories. So
categories,
the categories in commercial, I would say there are some general categories that everyone should at least have some familiarity with, which are retail, office, I guess you could say medical is sort of a subcategory of office, industrial, and then there's also like light industrial versus heavy industrial, multifamily, hospitality, right? And then there's like land for development. So, and each of those there's so many nuances to each of those that there are even brokers that specialize in each of those specific fields.
Mm-hmm.
So now not a lot of brokers will necessarily specialize
in just one. Yes,
sir. Usually they'll have a couple.
Exactly, and really just going ahead and naming these types, not to get into the nitty gritty, but there's so many things that are different about it. Like an industrial user might be more focused on energy consumption inside the building, making sure what they're trying to do is going to be plausible in there, while a retail user might be more worried about, how many cars are passing by this slot. So those are things that talking to an agent and them understanding who you as the client are, if they're a professional agent, they'll be able to start breaking those down and evaluating what spot will be best from you, just from that initial conversation.
Yeah, one of the things that I do notice is, typically when we get phone calls or people just talk about it out in the ether about utilizing an agent, oftentimes they're like, oh, well, I already have access to LoopNet or Crexy or, and I can find properties. And one of the things that, at least that we do, is we, obviously those resources are available and that's great. But we tend to do a lot of off-market seeking, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of properties that either aren't on the market, or we leverage our broker network to be able to access. What these are for leases or for an acquisition. So, one of the things that I think is missing from the equation here is that, yes, you have access to LoopNet and Crexy, but those aren't all the options that are on the table.
No.
The difference between like residential and commercial, in my view, is that in residential, a person will have emotional, personal reasons to keep a property. In commercial, most of the time, there's a number that someone will let a property go for.
Exactly.
Right? So it's just a question of like, okay, what's the number? And then is that number something that's, feasible on the buy side if you're if you're a buyer? And if you're a seller, just understanding, hey, if we have a buyer that would pay your number, would you sell the property? Most of the time, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just really kind of doing, the advantage in my view of having someone who is familiar with the market, who's familiar with the different options that are, I would say, in the field, because on the market is not the same as what's in the field. right? Because there's what's on the market is the stuff that people have risen their hand and say, hey, I want to sell this, I want to lease this or whatever. But what's in the field is stuff that is potential for a sale where someone is either would consider, which most of the time they would for the right number. And sometimes that right number is not as, outrageous as some people might assume. So, I was actually working with a client, I'm actually actively working with a client now where they were looking for some land to build on, and there's not really a lot of land that's available in our market right now.
Yeah.
That's live on the market for sale. But I knew of a couple of owners that had property that they talked about in general about possibly selling. So I reached out to them and I was like, hey, listen, I have a buyer that would be interested in your lot. Would you sell it? And they said yes. And now we're effectively going through the process of an LOI to negotiate whether this is going to actually be a feasible deal.
Yeah.
So these are things that I want to say there's like 35% of all commercial transactions happen off market.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, it's so you're missing out on effectively like 30% of options by not working with a broker who's familiar with the
off-market availability, or even has contacts in the areas that you might be interested in.
Yeah. Now, do you have any other thoughts on like the advantages of leveraging a commercial broker?
Now, definitely when it comes into negotiation form, and that is the number one thing, whether it's tenants or buyer or even a seller who's looking to go ahead and get rid of a piece of land, definitely negotiations is the number one thing that I've seen people go ahead and get the most advantage out of it. Even just the other day, I was working with a tenant and they were like, hey, just have the landlord send us their offer. And obviously we're representing the tenant or the landlord, so I didn't say this necessarily right there, but in my head that is such a miscue to be a tenant and have the landlord give you the first offer and anchor with his favorable terms instead of you coming to them with their terms. So it's simple things like that,
right?
Not to go too deep into any of the nuances, that if you had a commercial agent, you would kind of understand, or you would know, oh, well, if I'm interested, let me make that first offer. Let me not have them come to me with their highest and best. Just all types of simple things like that when it comes to negotiations.
Yeah. I think that's an important fact. One of the things that is a lot of people, business owners, even investors, more seasoned investors are probably more familiar with this, but what is actually negotiable is typically not really known. There are some folks will have some familiarity with it, but there's a lot of people, business owners in particular, that they're focused on their business, so they're not really paying attention to. They're like thinking about, well, how much do I have to pay? That's really what they're concerned about, but not realizing there's so many other elements to a lease negotiation in particular that can be negotiated in the deal. And obviously it's going to be determined by what the tenant ultimately is willing to do, what the landlord is ultimately willing to do, and the same thing would go with a purchase, right? Or a sale, is what the buyer is willing to do versus what the seller is willing to do. I'm working on a deal right now where we're negotiating. So the project is about a $2 million project, and they didn't have. They were not able to get SBA financing, so which is what they were going for. It's an operator who wants to use the property for their own business, and because the property that they're looking to buy doesn't have any history, and there's a new operator in this area, the SBA financing basically advised them that they can't do the traditional 10% down, right, which is pretty common for SBA loans. So they said that they'd be willing to do 25% down, which is more in line with a more conventional loan, but there's other benefits to the SBA loan. Now, in that particular scenario, if he's got to put 25% down, that throws the deal off kilter for him. Like, it's just too difficult for him to put that kind of money down and then also go into investing into his operations. So we went back to the seller and was like, hey, listen, would you be willing to hold a second note behind the lender to cover 15 to 20% of the down payment? And right now, we have sort of a soft yes on that, which they will be willing to consider it. It all depends on the rest of the terms to see how the rest of it makes sense. So now we're negotiating on what would the rest of the terms need to look like in order for the seller to be willing to do that.
Yep, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know?
So now we have him potentially with 10, maybe 15% down on a deal that he would otherwise have to put 25 to 30% down, and you know, the seller is, because they're motivated, you know, they're considering holding that second note, and it would be for a short term. It might be only for like 2 or 3 years, but it allows the operator to get in there, get established, get set, and then refinance that seller out of the deal in 2 to 3 years.
And get them paid out. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that you can do creatively to make a deal work. It's just a question of like what exactly is each party willing to do? What are they aware of what's possible? Because I can't tell you how many times I hear, oh, you can do that? Like most of the time the answer is yes.
Yeah.
As long as everybody agrees, then for the most part, as long as it's not illegal, right? As long as it's not illegal and everyone agrees, for the most part, yeah, you could probably do that, right? So that's what's cool about negotiating, and with a broker who understands that, they can kind of really start pulling the strings of the things that make the most sense for everyone to make a deal happen.
Exactly.
Which is really, really cool.
And that's really all everyone wants to get down to.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in this case with a motivated seller, I mean, thank God. And I'm sure you've also gone ahead and in negotiations given up a little bit to be able to make that ask. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's a win-win now.
Yes, and sometimes that has to happen. I mean, that's part of the whole project is a big negotiating conversation, right?
Yeah.
And everybody in the deal has to figure out a way for it to make sense for everybody. So in this particular case, we're still in the middle of negotiations. I'm really hoping that we can make that come to pass. So that would be great. I mean, another thing that I worked on, it was on a project where the price of the property was a little high, and they weren't really willing to move much. So we went to the operator, and we asked the operator, well, what are you planning to do with the project? And they wanted to add some additional offices and increase the income of the property. So we went back to the lender and we're like, hey, listen, what if the operator basically warrants that they're going to improve the property and then increase the income of the property? Now, this only works with an existing operator who has a history. They don't have a history, you're probably not gonna be able to get away with this. But they had a history, good history. And they were able, so we chatted with them and we said, okay, well, they need plans. So we put together essentially a plan of action of what we would be doing with the building, including the build outs and all that good stuff. I did a pro forma on what the numbers would look like in terms of like how much more revenue it would bring. And even though the property was slightly overpriced, the buyer was able to show that if they built that out, it would make the numbers work.
Yeah.
And the bank was like, okay, well, I'll do that. Because they had experience, they said, well, you have experience as an operator. We see that you have the ability to do that. I would do that. And they were willing to fund the deal. So that's something that, again, if you're not familiar with how to walk through that whole conversation, there's no way that an operator is going to necessarily know that that's an option. So, there are just so many different avenues that you can address when it comes to negotiating, which really can change the whole dynamic of a deal.
For sure, it could kill a deal or it could keep a deal.
That's true. That's true. I mean, there are definitely some negotiators out there that are really always trying to play hardball, and I don't think that is necessarily. I think hardball should be the last resort. Yeah. I think that really it works way better when everyone's kind of having a conversation about, hey, what's really feasible here, and try to see if we can come to an agreement.
Yeah.
So unless of course you have all the leverage. If you have all the leverage, then I guess you can play hardball all day, right? So it all depends on what everyone's motivations are.
Depends on your prerogative.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that I always talk to my clients about is the team that we have.
Yes.
Right?
And it's funny you say that because I was about to bring it
up. Talk to me about what you're thinking on that, yeah.
So pretty much, not only when you're going ahead and hiring a commercial broker, should you just be hiring that commercial broker, just like how you've already kind of touched on and all of that, they should have different vendors, different members of their sphere that they can go ahead and fall back on for different things. So when building a team around a client, we always like to start with one of the first things, the lender, making sure they have a really solid lender, whether it's an SBA or a private lender, whatever it might be, whatever matches their case is who we want to go ahead and try and set them up with. And we like to give them options. We never want to corral them into one person, because I mean, I know it's best to shop around. See what rates might be out there, whatever it is. Also, in terms of other vendors, especially if it's going to be a sale, you're going to be doing some development. We have GCs that we work with on all types of projects. We're also more than happy to bring in a GC, because at least from our experience, a lot of these business owners, or at least a lot of these experienced business owners, already have a guy they may have used before or like or whatever. So we're always willing to partner with new vendors depending on what the client needs or what they're doing. And then finally, I mean, aside from that, just making sure you get a really good attorney on your team as well. We have one that we use all the time, but of course we never take our clients away from their preferred vendors as well. But just making sure that you have an attorney who can double check that paperwork, especially in commercial where it's a lot of custom contracts, and a lot of things might slip by because we are not necessarily attorneys. We don't practice law. We will go ahead and do that initial skim, but that attorney is really going to be able to speak to our client on it. Say, hey, in this paragraph right here in section 4, this is what it means by that, and really break it down so the client knows when they're reading these contracts, it's not just 52 pages of overwhelmed. It's, I actually understand this isn't right, that I can live with. This, let's talk about that a little bit more. So
and what's interesting about that is a lot of people will want to go through a transaction without an attorney. And that's scary because if unless you have like a really good solid understanding of legal language, like that can bite you in the rear. Because a lot of the language that will be written in some of these contracts, especially if the other side, most of the time the other side has legal representation. It's very rare for both sides not to have legal representation. So if you're the one saying I don't want an attorney, you're probably the side that doesn't have legal representation and the other side does.
And that's a major disadvantage.
Because the way that a lot of this legal language is written is it's sometimes it's obscure or it's intentionally vague. So it can be highly interpretive, and at face value it may look like it's good, but because it's so vague, the lack of specificity opens the door for
other nuances. So, and it's funny you say that because that's probably the number one thing that I have pointed out by the attorneys we work with is vague language. Hey, let's get more specific on this. Hey, let's put a timeline on this. Like, I don't want open doors anywhere. And I mean, I love it because it protects our clients. For sure.
And I think that's a really important part. I mean, I think, while obviously we have all kind of partners that are important for us, in my professional opinion, I think an attorney is one of our best partners. And having a really solid attorney as part of the client's team is, I think, a critical part to the process. We usually talk very early on about, hey, do you already have an attorney? If you do have one, are they specialized in commercial real estate? Because, just because you have an attorney that's helped you with something doesn't mean that they have the expertise and knowledge to be able to help you with commercial real estate.
And that's not saying they can't help at all, but they just might not be an expert in this.
They're not specialized. And that makes a difference, right? If you're going into, you don't want to go into, I mean, think about it like this is the way I think about it, right? Like the easiest thing that I think most people can relate to is the idea of like a doctor, a surgeon, right? Those kinds of things. And you can go into a hospital and a general doctor can probably help you with like any heart problems you have. But if you really have serious heart problems, you probably want to talk to a cardiologist. A cardiologist is hyper specialized in just the heart. Why would you, if you had the choice, if you could choose between the two, why would you not go with the specialist, right? So this is the same idea where, you have attorneys that specialize in a bunch of different things, and you don't necessarily want a divorce attorney that's managing your commercial real estate unless they also do and specialize in commercial real estate. Because, I mean, like I said, those are two different specializations, and you just want to make sure you have somebody who can really who understands the nuance and the ins and outs of commercial real estate so that you're protected in that deal.
100%.
Because I do know the other thing that I think is sometimes challenging is because we work so heavily with our clients, and we know so much about the terms and whatnot and we obviously do the negotiations for the deal. A lot of times clients will want us to do things that an attorney really should be doing. They'll be asking us to change language or doing stuff like that, and that's something that we don't have a license to do that. So it really puts our license in jeopardy if we make attempts to make those kinds of changes. This is why you want an attorney to come in, and you don't really want us doing that. We're not attorneys. We're not thinking like attorneys. We're like we can negotiate the terms. We can help you with the property. We can I'd even be happy enough to like read over a contract and just say, hey, ask the attorney about this and that, right? That kind of thing. But like in terms of getting into the weeds with a contract, I really, that's not an area that I would be comfortable in. I don't think it's a good idea for a broker to be getting into the weeds with that. That's something for an attorney to really kind of look over with the client.
Yeah, and just like you said, kind of that's the most I will personally do as well. Like if for some reason I'm the one looking at it instead of an attorney, I will literally just say, hey, page 2, reread this, and if you don't understand what I'm pointing out, you should really go get an attorney.
Right. And I mean, I think it's okay if you were to say, well, this is a little like I would have the attorney review like that line because that looks like I don't know if I agree with that, but really have the attorney take a look at it. So I mean, I feel like I can give my 2 cents, but it's always with the caveat of like, listen, I'm not an attorney, but this right there looks a little funny. Why don't you have the attorney take a look at that and make sure that that's okay? Right? That's the kind of thing that I think at the extent that I would be comfortable with.
The highest extent.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think we're not permitted to interpret.
Yeah.
That's the big thing.
I know I love to talk, which is why I shut myself down a lot.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you read something like, oh, I understand that, and then you want to explain it to someone to help, and then you're like, okay, now I'm acting as an attorney, and I can't do that, right? So, anyways, I think an attorney is one of the better partners. Other partners would include like architects, engineers, surveyors, exactly.
Because a lot of time, especially with the land deals, we have to go ahead and get it recertified. Correct.
So there's a lot of different players that can be a part, and every deal is going to have a different team.
100%.
Yeah. So like what you said earlier, one of the things is we sort of do an analysis of the person, we figure out what their needs are, and then we start building a team around them. And of course, if they have some of their own players, then we incorporate their players. Yeah, exactly. So that way, they have the team that's available for them. It's not just. I wish it was just the Gus show or the Brad show, right? And we could just be like walking in as heroes, but that's not really how this works. Like we're really here to make the client the hero and make sure that they have the team that they need so they can really succeed in the thing that they're trying to do.
100%.
At least that's our goal.
Their goal.
Yeah. So, any other elements that you can think of?
No, aside from that, I think we're all good. We covered vendors. We talked a little bit about negotiations. We didn't go super deep. Did you want to cover anything else on that?
No, not really. I mean, I think negotiations are those are going to be case by case.
Exactly.
And I think, we can talk about, I guess, historical things that we've experienced, which I think I spoke on a couple things that.
Yeah, you brought up some examples.
Yeah. But I don't know that we have to get too deep into that. I'll say this. How about this? I know that compensation is a question that a lot of people have questions on. What are your thoughts on how should a client be thinking about compensation?
Well, first off, everything's negotiable.
Yeah.
So nothing's ever set in stone.
Yeah.
You will go up to commercial agents or even residential agents who say this is their fee.
Yeah.
And of course, as a client, you can negotiate that, and some agents might play hardball, and some agents might come down depending. When it comes down to us, though, and our commissions, we usually try to go ahead and let our clients know, hey, for what we're charging, we're going to go ahead and first try to get the landlord to pay for it. So this way, it's not even going to fall back on you.
This is if you're a tenant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or even
a buyer.
Or even a buyer.
Yeah. You have the seller pay. Negotiate the seller to cover that compensation,
and we get that, or at least try to get that compensation most of the time taken care of by that other side. Mm-hmm. So this way, it alleviates another portion of this is more compensation I have to pay for. And after this, I have to do my build out because these business owners are thinking about that. So the more we can take off their plate, the better. So one of the first things we always try to do is negotiate our own commission. As far as our compensation goes, like I said, it is negotiable. So never gone ahead and stuck to like a primary number or whatever it might be, and a lot of people will go ahead and be like, oh, you should get at least 5% or whatever it is for a deal or whatever. And at the end of the day, I mean, truly it comes down to the client and what they're asking of us. If it's something that it might take an X amount of time, we might renegotiate how we usually do a deal. If we know, oh, this could take up to 2 years to complete, you know, or if it's something that might be a little bit more standard, we might have more of a standard commission together. So it really just depends client to client on that. And also, when it comes down to it, the timeline of how long we might be working with them.
Now, you know, one of the things that I think is, and we've had some discussion specifically in the residential space, but this is the commercial space has sort of behaved like this for a very long time, anyways. You know, a lot of buyers and tenants, you know, it is important to note that if you're a buyer or if you're a tenant, the service that's being provided is for you. Right. So, you know, there's not really another like service that I can think of where you get the service and then someone else pays for you getting that service, right? So that's not normal. Typically, if you have a service being done for you, you pay for that. So it is important to note that if you're a tenant or if you're a buyer, if you're working with a commercial broker, it is going to be technically your responsibility to compensate that broker for them helping you, which makes sense. They're providing the service for you. Now, on the flip side, to your point, is that it's very, I would say, it is very customary for the broker, especially if they're very good, to be able to negotiate that compensation from the landlord if you're a tenant, or from the seller if you're a buyer, right?
Or at least a portion of it.
A portion, some or a portion of that, right? So you know, I do think it's important that when you get into a relationship with a broker, one, it's going to be to your advantage. Two, you know, if they are good at what they do, they'll be worth it, right? And three, that oftentimes, and I would say in most cases, the broker, if they're good at negotiating, they will oftentimes negotiate a portion or all of their compensation from the seller or the landlord. Now, there are going to be some times when the seller or the landlord will not cover that compensation. Under those circumstances, at least in my experience, what I found is it typically is a seller or landlord that is not represented, which means that you as a tenant or the buyer are now in the advantage because you have a broker and they don't. And typically that broker is able to negotiate such a good deal
that it doesn't even matter.
That your cost is that exactly. Like you're getting such a good deal from the landlord or from the seller who's not represented because they don't know the nuances of negotiation the way the broker does, that you're going to actually get such a good deal that the cost of the broker is totally going to be worth it. It'll be you would get way more out of that deal than it's going to cost you to have that broker.
Completely offset.
Yeah. So I think that, you know, you have to think about, like, when you're going into these things, having an expert in your side is really beneficial. And if the landlord or the listing or the seller have a broker, oftentimes the broker on that side will discuss with them the advantages of negotiating compensation with the buyer side broker, and then so at least they'll be considering that, right? But even in the cases where they don't have representation, like it usually works out better for the tenant or for the buyer if they are represented versus if they're not. So I think that, you know, those things are important to note. At least that has been my experience. You know, I've run into nightmare scenarios from both tenants and buyers who decided to move forward, not represented themselves. I'll give you a really good example. There was a tenant that was actually referred to me. I spoke to her briefly, and I explained to her how we could help, and she's like, no, you know, I think I'm gonna go ahead and do it on my own. I'm like, no worries, just FYI, like once you get into a lease, I'm not gonna really be able to assist you. Like that's gonna be really for an attorney to do, like, because once you're in it, I can't do anything. There's nothing I can do at that stage. So she proceeded forward. It was a property that she found in Winter Garden, in downtown Winter Garden, to operate her, it's like a baking business or something like that. And she got the lease. So I was like, okay, great, she got the lease. I ended up getting a call about a month later from the agent who referred her to me, saying, hey, such and such is having a problem. Can you give her a call? Maybe you can help her. I was like, oh, okay, I'll try.
Yeah.
I gave her a call, and I ended up finding out that she signed a lease where she was responsible for all of the maintenance and of the building, the entire maintenance of the building. So there was nothing that
all
the
the
landlord,
systems,
everything,
everything.
right? And she ended up finding out that when she started to do renovations to get the property ready, she found out that there were termites throughout the building.
Oof.
Not only was there termites in the building, the problem was that it's old winter garden where all the buildings are attached to each other. So her store had termites, but because her store had termites, the whole building had termites, really. So in order for her to be able to even treat it, she would have to have the whole building treated.
Yeah.
And she couldn't even open her bake shop because the food and
The enforcement on that, I forget what it's called as well.
So they didn't allow her to open because she had pests.
Yeah.
So she basically got a lease that she can't even use and she can't get out of it. So now she has she basically has a store that she can't operate her business out of, and she can't get out of that lease. And I told her, I was like, I can't, there's nothing I can do. You need an attorney for this. This is not something I can help with.
Yeah.
We would have definitely negotiated that term way out of that deal.
Mm-hmm.
And we also probably would have done a due diligence for like, hey, you want to get inspections to make sure you don't have wood destroying organisms or anything on the property before you go ahead and move in for your food related business.
Yeah.
Because anything food related, if you have any kind of pest issues, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a scenario where they went in without a broker. They decided to negotiate the deal. She probably got a great deal.
And she probably didn't realize that term. That term probably did not stand out to her
Correct.
until she was in it.
And now she's stuck in what looked like a good deal. She's now stuck in, and she can't operate out of the space because the cost to she would have to essentially shut down all the stores that are attached, tent the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then after tenting the whole thing, and then at whose cost?
Her cost.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? How crazy that is?
Sorry we're laughing at your pain, girl.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Like and that's unfortunate because, had she worked with a broker, I think any broker would have looked at that and be like, you don't want this here. This is a bad situation.
Or even at the very least, after pointing that out, and she's like, no, I still want to move forward, at least putting a cap in place or something. So, hey,
yeah.
we'll handle the initial, but if it's something that you need to tent the entire building, it's back on the landlord.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, that's a nightmare scenario, and I hate that happened. I couldn't do anything to help her. After
that point.
After the fact, there's nothing we can do. So, getting yourself set up is such an important part of an investment like this, because once you're in it, once you've bought the property, once you've gotten into the lease, you're kind of stuck in it.
Mm-hmm.
So you really want to make sure a tenant and a buyer, it is a buyer/tenant beware.
Yeah.
The landlord has no obligation to disclose, the seller has no obligation to disclose. So that means that it's on you as a tenant or as the buyer to do your due diligence to ensure that this is going to be a good fit for you. And if it's not, it's on you.
Yep.
You're stuck with it. So that's the part that people miss. It's such a big investment. And if you're not doing the appropriate due diligence on the property, you're going to be stuck with a problem.
Yeah.
And it could be a very expensive one.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why you want to use a commercial broker to go ahead and mitigate your risk.
Yes.
Straight up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Straight up.
Absolutely.
No. Well, unless there's anything else you wanted to cover, I think we pretty much hit it all. Going back through it, really, when you're working with a commercial broker, you want to make sure you have someone who has market knowledge, familiar with the local areas that you're looking in. You also want someone who's going to go ahead and build a strategy around you and your business, someone who's going to be focused directly on what your goals are and how we can obtain those for you. Another form, again, is you really want to make sure that they're a good, strong negotiator. Most of the time, that goes ahead and starts right off the bat when you start asking them about their commission. And then finally, you want to make sure you have someone who's fluid in the process so you don't have something like that happen to you.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
So, anyways, if you guys have any questions, we're happy to help. You're welcome to make a comment below or feel free to reach out to us directly. This is the Commercial Department Podcast. My name is Gus.
I'm Brad.
And we will see you next time. Peace.